بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. We read Hadith number...
We started at 68.
We're at 68. Yes. وعن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال أقبلت راكبا على حمار أتان وأنا يومئذ قد نازهت الاحتلام ورسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي بمنى إلى غير جدار فمررت بين يدي بعض الصف وأرسلت الأتان ترتع في الصف فلم ينكر ذلك علي. So this is the chapter متى يصح سماع الصغير. When is it appropriate for a young one to start listening to lectures? Let's just call it that. Right? Now, to put some context to make this relevant to our times today, you always have that one or two people who cannot stand the presence of kids in the masjid. Don't bring them. Khushu'. It's like the only people in the world who have khushu' are these folks, right? It's all about khushu'. The kids don't need to be here. If the parents can't control them, don't bring them, etc. Right? Now, we don't want the masjid to turn into a fiasco, but at the same time, we cannot look at the masjid as a place not for kids. Right? And when I say kids, I don't mean kids to play. I mean kids in terms of age. Right? Here, you have Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala an, who's a young man. He says, when he's talking about this moment, he said I was at the age of puberty. So the age of 12, 13, something like that. Probably even a little bit before 10, because Ibn Abbas was born when Hijrah happened. So by the time the Prophet ﷺ passed away, he was 11 years old maximum. So he was, let's say, 10 years old, because it's Hajj, 9, 10 years old. So he's getting close to the age of puberty. He says that I was riding a donkey. He was riding a donkey, and the Prophet ﷺ was praying. He was doing a salah, and there were people praying. Ibn Abbas wants to join. So he goes towards the salah. He gets off the donkey and lets the donkey go. Right? He lets the donkey go. And the donkey goes in front of certain people, the line, right? And Ibn Abbas goes in front of people and goes and he prays. And he says, what's the point? He says, فَلَمْ يُنْكِرْ ذَلِكَ عَلَيْهِ. The Prophet didn't tell me, why did you do that, or you shouldn't do that. Right? Some people get mad, why is the kid running in front of the lines? It's okay. It's allowed. Right? Like in Ramadan, there was a girl who was walking in front of the lines because she wanted to go to the bathroom. And a big deal was made out of it. Yeah, this is it. A big deal was made out of it. It's not allowed, and no, it is allowed. It is allowed. Even if a donkey passes in front of you, right? The Prophet ﷺ didn't say, no, you shouldn't let the donkey pass in front. No, you should have not been here. Or you distracted people. Or the khushu' has gone. None of that. Right? This really frustrates me. It really frustrates me because families stop coming to the masjid because of a grumpy person. Like, you're grumpy. Right? If you cannot stand the presence of children, you don't come to the masjid. And why does everybody have to conform with you? And all the families now are further isolated from the masjid so that you can find some peace. Why don't you learn to appreciate kids? Why don't you learn to love how Allah created kids? Again, we don't let the masajid become a zoo. Right? There needs to be certain expectations. But what big masjid out there is a fiasco like this? None. You'll find maybe on Friday nights where there's family activities, there are kids, it's a little bit louder. But throughout the week, it's not happening. Maybe once a family comes, they have some kids, the kids walk around, they run around a little bit. It's one salah. It's not happening every single salah. Right? So here, we're learning, Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala an is telling us, the Prophet ﷺ tolerated the presence of kids. Now, I'm not saying kids were running left and right and they were screaming and shouting, but there were kids there. Right? And he never said, why, don't bring your kids to the masjid. Show me one hadith where the Prophet says to the families, like we hear in a lot of masajid, don't bring your kids to the masjid, don't bring your kids to the masjid. Show me one hadith. where the Prophet said this. Show me one hadith where the Prophet ﷺ got mad because there was a kid crying. Right? Rather, it's quite the opposite. When the Prophet ﷺ was praying, a mother brought her infant, and the infant started crying. What did the Prophet do? He hastened his salah so that the mother isn't, feeling anxious because her baby is crying and she wants to end salah. He hastened the salah so that she can relieve her anxiety. Right? So the masjid is a place for kids to come and learn. We want our kids to have a relationship with the masjid. And for them, as kids, fun is how they communicate. Fun is what they do. Right? And what ends up happening when you allow the masjid to be a place of fun for the kids, I'm not saying the musalla, the masjid in general, right? When it's allowed to be a place of fun, what happens in the mind and the heart of the child is that they develop a positive relationship to the masjid. And when they grow up and they're in their late teens, they're in their 20s, they're in their 30s, they always love to go to the masjid. They don't know why. They don't know why. Like, I really like going to the masjid. I don't know why. Well, we'll tell you why. As psychological studies show. Because you had such a positive experience when you were a kid, you built that connection. Right? So, we need to make the masjid a place where kids come. And there are ways where we can, make sure that the kids are able to be kids without being shouted at, without being looked down upon. Parents aren't embarrassed in front of everyone. While at the same time, we maintain an amount of order in the masjid. But the idea is, if every now and then a kid does something distracting, every now and then, it's not a means to get mad and to say, no, you shouldn't be here. Right? Here you have it happening in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Also, and this is the point Imam Bukhari is specifically making, that the masjid is a place where knowledge is spread. You have the khatira, you have lectures, etc. We should also see our kids as mature enough to begin to understand what's being said. Right? Some parents they prolong the immaturity of the child. Oh, they're still too young. Oh, they're still so young. No, there's still a lot in front of them. It's school, they have to focus on school. Back in the day, a 13-year-old was ready for marriage. They were ready to have kids. Maturely, I'm talking about in terms of maturity. In our times today, because of the way they are treated, whether in schools or by parents, the kids remain kids until 25. 40s, 40s, right?
50s and 70s.
Uh-huh. Now you're just...
No, I'm telling you.
No, honestly, especially boys. Right? Why? Because everything's so controlled. Here are the rules, you have to follow it. Stay behind these walls, no, you have to be safe. I'm afraid, people we're limiting their ability to be the best version of themselves. I'm not saying they're weak, but because of these rules, because of certain parenting styles, these kids aren't able to grow to their full potential that they have, right? And oftentimes it's in their 30s they begin to realize, man, I'm really behind, right? So Ibn Abbas, when he was 9-10 years old, was already going to the masjid, standing with the adults, right? Learning from the Prophet ﷺ, because that's the environment that was created for him. That's the environment that he was invited to, right? The next hadith, عن محمود بن الربيع رضي الله تعالى عنه قال عقلت من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مجة مجها في وجهي وأنا ابن خمس سنين من دلو. So, here this companion says, when I was 5 years old, I remember from the Prophet ﷺ. So he was a young kid in the life of the Prophet. He says that I remember, when I was 5, I remember the Prophet ﷺ put some water in his mouth and started squirting it at me. Sheikh Yasser used to do this, right? That's what I hear. Sheikh Yasser, he would do this to kids. With the kids, right? He'd squirt water. He's getting this from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Now a 5-year-old, water's being squirted at him or her, what are they going to do? What's their reaction? They love it, right? It's funny. It's funny. I remember my grandfather used to do this to us, right? He used to grab us and he used to take his teeth out. He had dentures, right? And all of us, we would get scared, right? He would take water, he'd drink water, he'd look at one of us and he'd squirt it at us. And what the memories we have of him is all positive, right? He's playing with the kids. But the point Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala is highlighting here is the fact that these kids were around the Prophet. And the Prophet was around these kids, right? You see, back in the day, in a household, you had the children, you had the parents, and you had the grandparents. And maybe even the great-grandparents. They were all around each other. Now I understand there was a lot of negative that comes with that. I understand this, but that's not what I'm pointing out here. But when kids see these different generations, they have different expectations, they have different ways of dealing with things. There are multiple people around them, each one has their own likes and dislikes. The kid begins to develop a much broader way of seeing the world, right? It's just not me. It's many people. And there are some things I could do in front of some people, some things I can't do in front of people. It just is, right? This helps develop maturity. It helps prepare them for marriage. There's another person in my life, and they might not like the things that I like, and I might dislike the things that they like, right? So the point here is that kids were around the Prophet ﷺ. And of course, being around the Prophet, they're going to learn from the Prophet ﷺ. Right? Either they're going to learn from his behaviors, or they're going to learn from what he's saying. So, as parents, right, one of the things that is very important for parents to do. Now, don't forget, I'm talking to more than just you. I'm talking to people who might be viewing this online, right? One thing that is very important for parents to do is to take them to the places that they go. Like me as a father, if I have to go to I have to go give condolences, I should take my son with me so that he sees this. If I have a social gathering to go to, it's wise to bring my child with me. Now, if there are kids, great, but if there aren't kids, then as a parent, I should understand that his patience is limited. He's not just going to sit on a couch and listen to a bunch of grown-ups talk for a long time. But maybe if I go there for 20 minutes, that's enough for him to tolerate, but he'll see the etiquettes. When I go, I bring a gift, right, to thank the people. I go, and how do I interact? You see what I mean? Kids should be around their parents, and not just at home, outside. It's good for the parent to take their children to work. I know sometimes it's convenient, sometimes not convenient, right? But every now and then, take the child to work so that they see what's going on. It helps them grow at an earlier age so that they're ahead of the game. All right. Babu fadli man alima wa allam. This is the chapter about the virtue of learning and teaching. عن أبي موسى رضي الله تعالى عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال مثل ما بعثني الله به من الهدى والعلم كمثل الغيث الكثير أصاب أرضا. Here the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, after. Thank you. Here the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام is saying, I'm going to give you an analogy of what I have come with in terms of guidance and knowledge. In other words, the Prophet ﷺ is going to give us a picture, an image, to better understand the idea of guidance, hidayah, and knowledge. Right? Now, how does it work? And he says that the example is like heavy rain. Heavy rain that comes on the earth, it falls on earth. فكان منها نقية قبلت الماء فأنبتت الكلأ والعشب الكثير وكانت منها أجاذب أمسكت الماء فنفع الله بها الناس فشربوا وسقوا وزرعوا وأصابت منها طائفة أخرى إنما هي قيعان لا تمسك ماء ولا تنبت كلأ. He says that, imagine heavy rain. It's raining on a piece of land. One type of earth is very fertile. When it rains a lot, it absorbs the water and it produces its agriculture. It absorbs the water, produces agriculture. Another type of land is stiff, right? It's hard. So when it rains, the earth doesn't absorb it, but it holds it. It forms a pool of water, right? And a third type of land, third type of dirt, where it's qiyan, it's unfertile. It absorbs the water, but nothing comes out. Right? It absorbs the water, and nothing comes out. And the Prophet ﷺ says, as for the first one, which was what? It absorbs the water, and it produces agriculture. The Prophet says that this land benefited from the water, and produced that which is beneficial to others. The second type of land that held the water, but didn't absorb it, didn't produce any agriculture, what's left is a pool of water, right? The earth itself didn't benefit from it, but other people came and drank from it, used it, irrigated their own land, right? And the third type, the earth didn't benefit from it, and nobody else benefited from it. Okay. So the Prophet ﷺ says, فَذَلِكَ مَثَلُ مَنْ فَقُهَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ وَنَفَعَهُ ما بعثني الله تعالى به فعلم وعلم ومثل من لم يرفع بذلك رأسا ولم يقبل هدى الله الذي أرسلت به. So here the Prophet ﷺ says these three different types of earth is like the one who learns the faith and benefits from it and benefits others from it, versus somebody who receives the guidance, doesn't benefit from it, and nobody benefits from that person. So the Quran, and here the same thing, uses rain and water to refer to hidayah, guidance. Why? Or to wahi, the Quran. Why? Because water to the body is life. Water to the body, water to biology is life. Right? Water is the essence of life. The Quran, guidance, plays a similar role to the soul. The soul gets its life from revelation, from guidance, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you see the analogy? The earth is an analogy to the heart. The earth in the Quran, when it's used as an analogy or dirt, it's referring to the heart. Why? Because on this earth there are different types of dirts. You can't grow potatoes anywhere. There's a certain dirt that it needs. And even within the types of dirt that potatoes could grow in, there are certain places, climates, terrains where it's just better. The best potatoes come from where? Idaho, right? The best corn comes from where? The US, corn. The US corn is very good. Avocados, Mexico, actually Palestine too. Yeah. But you're not going to grow avocados in Maine. I don't think it works that way. Unless you have like a greenhouse and you bring the specific. You see what I mean here? So there are different types of dirt for this earth that makes the terrain different. See, when I was in Jordan, I traveled all around Jordan. Small country, but I traveled all around. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the Levant, this area, as Mubarak, blessed, one of the meanings is there's so much variety. So Jordan, there are areas that are very low in elevation, like the Dead Sea, very low. And there are places that are high in elevation, like the northwestern part of Jordan, high in elevation. There are places that are desert, and there are places that can get snow, right? Even when you go from place to place, you can even notice that the dirt, the color of the dirt, the texture of dirt is different. This is why one of the reasons why it's blessed. You can have everything, all sorts of agriculture there because of the difference here, right? People are like that. Their hearts are different. Some people are soft by nature, by their heart. They're soft. Others are hard. As the Prophet ﷺ says, Abu Bakr is soft. Umar is tough. Isa and Ibrahim were soft. Musa and Nuh were tough. It's not one is better than the other. It's just personality, right? So when Allah refers to the earth in an analogous form, He's referring to the heart. So here, you have some hearts that when guidance, huda, Quran comes to them, they absorb it, they benefit from it. They benefit from it, and they benefit others. Others, when guidance comes to them, they're able to memorize it and benefit others, but they themselves, their level of iman doesn't really go higher. And pay attention to this one, because the question of why are there some scholars who don't seem to have much taqwa? This is it. This is it. I'm not saying they're bad people, because the Prophet here is not saying the second type is that they're not bad people. But they didn't benefit much, and other people are benefiting more than they themselves. Right? You know, I can teach you things that you are impacted more than me. Like I can give you tafsir or teaching you this hadith, and it impacts you. You benefited more from it than me who's teaching you. Right? Why? What's the difference? What's the reason? The heart. Right? The heart. And this is why tazkiyah, the science of tazkiyah, is so important. This is why before Bukhari, you know, I spent, 5 years with you talking purely about tazkiyah. Because it's the point, right? It's the point. There's little benefit from this unless your heart is actually benefiting from it. Right? So we want to make sure our hearts are prepared to receive the knowledge. And there's a third type of people who, no matter how much it rains, they don't benefit anything from it, nobody benefits from them. Right? And these are the people who, when the guidance of Allah comes to them, they reject it. These are the disbelievers. Right? No matter how much guidance comes to them, it's rejection after rejection after rejection. What's the problem? Their heart. They themselves are off. Right? Allah Ta'ala alam. Bab رفع العلم وظهور الجهل. Or before this, another point that this hadith is highlighting is that the point of knowledge is to benefit yourself, to grow, right? To grow. I mean, think about it this way. Imagine bringing seeds. I'm sure you all have like a backyard where you like to plant things, or maybe you used to like to plant things, now you got bored of it, right? But imagine taking a seed, putting it in dirt, and watering it, and nothing's happening. Right? Nothing's happening. How long will it be before you say, you know what, this is boring, I'm not going to continue? Sooner or later, right? You'll see this as foolish. I mean, what's the point of me spending time watering something that's not growing? Right? And the answer, I mean, the response to that is that, well, there's something off. There's something wrong here. Something is being done incorrectly. Either you're trying to plant the wrong plant, or the dirt isn't proper, or the dirt needs to be renewed, or you need some, whatever it is, the fertilizer, whatever it is, right? The idea is knowledge is meant to benefit you. You're meant to grow from it. The point of knowledge is not to memorize a bunch of things. You have information in your head. The point is for you to actually be impacted by it, to benefit from it. Now, there are some things where it's not really a spiritual thing, like learning how to make wudu, learning how to do wudu, performing wudu, does have spiritual benefits to it, but its primary function is what? To prepare yourself for salah, right? Salah, on the other hand, when you learn about it so you can fulfill the obligation, but the purpose of salah is to do what for you? To make you grow spiritually, to benefit you in terms of your iman, to expiate your sins. right? And unfortunately, in our times today, it's so difficult to even get a little piece of that, let alone all of it, a little piece of it. Why? Well, I think there's a few things we can point out. One is how distracted we are. We're very distracted, very, very distracted, right? And that makes a difference. Another thing is we have our priorities off. You know, if we were just to be very blunt and say, what is the number one, what do most American Muslims prioritize in their life? What is it? What's their number one priority? I mean, it's not hard to find out. It's not a bizarre, it's not like a mystery. Their number one priority is money. That's what it is. You gotta go to school, become a doctor. Why? Because, well, it makes a lot of money. It's worldly, right? Oh, don't go to the protests because you might not have a job. Prioritize. I mean, people are always Palestine and Palestine. We need to. Okay, you have an opportunity now. Why are you stopping your kids? Why? Oh, because money. You see the problem? Right? You see the where the priorities are? And it's not just an American Muslim thing. It's global. Right? It's a global Muslim thing, unfortunately. So that's another reason. We see like, okay, how is this going to make me money? How is learning about this hadith going to benefit me? And even when we teach, right, in order for people to connect with what's being said, it needs to be made relevant to their worldly affairs. Now, don't misunderstand me. The Quran is meant to guide us, right? It's meant to guide us in this life and prepare for the afterlife, right? But you see that our mindset is so off, spiritually speaking, because of our prioritization. You're not going to get the most out of the Quran and out of the Sunnah if a person's number one goal is making money, having a big home, having nice cars. It's just not going to happen, right? That's not why Quran and Sunnah were sent to us. All right, the next chapter is the lifting of knowledge and the spreading of ignorance. The lifting of knowledge and the spreading of ignorance. عن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن من أشراط الساعة أن يرفع العلم ويثبت الجهل ويشرب الخمر ويظهر الزنا. Here Anas رضي الله تعالى عنه says that the Prophet ﷺ said, among the signs of the Day of Judgment is that knowledge will be lifted. What does it mean that knowledge is lifted? It means there are less and less scholars. There are less and less scholars. And in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that knowledge will be lifted and the amount of scholars will be so little that people will begin to take their information from ignorant people. Right? So just for us to understand what the Prophet ﷺ means here. So among the signs of the Day of Judgment is that there will be less and less scholars. Now in our times today, there's too many. There's a lot of people talking, but when it comes to scholarship, like actual scholarship, is there little? You think so? Actually, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so, no. There are few popular scholars. Like we tend to gravitate to a few big names, right? So we think that the amount of scholarship is little. No, that's not the case. If you just look at the masajid in Orange County, right? Looking at the imams, I mean, these are people of knowledge. Rarely do you find an ignorant imam. You might find, maybe not the best imam, but not ignorant imams. Right? I can confidently say that most of the Orange County imams are students of knowledge. So we're not at that level yet. Right? But a day will come where it will be so few scholars. And ignorance will take root. Why is this such a problem? Well, because one of the things that makes a human being unique is their mind. One of Allah's greatest blessings on the human being is their mind. We are meant to be rational, right? We are meant to be rational. Allah created us with emotions, But emotions aren't highlighted in the Quran, right? They're not highlighted in the Quran. Knowledge is. You have so many verses that say, أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ. Do they not use their minds? Why are they using them? Use your minds, right? It's a blessing. And because of this, Iblis is constantly trying to get us to demote our minds and behave purely on instinct. To put it differently, we have rationale, we have desires, and we have emotions. Acting purely on emotions causes us to make poor decisions. I'm not saying emotions are bad. Allah created us with emotions and it plays a role. But when it comes to decision making, right? When I make decisions purely on emotion, it's not going to go well. It's not going to go well, right? It needs to be on rationale. So Iblis wants to demote our minds. He wants us to get us to not use our minds so that what takes place are our desires. Why do you do that? Because I want to. See that? Why do you drink a beverage that smells disgusting, that tastes disgusting according to you, that is harmful to your health, that causes disease, that causes death? Why? Like, rationally speaking, it makes no sense. You end up acting like fools when you drink this beverage. You cause problems for yourselves. What good comes from it? They used to say a glass of wine a day is good for you, right? You remember that? And then a few years ago, they came out with research that says even a glass of wine, one glass a day is not good for you. There's no good in it for you. Yet, they will continue to drink it. Why? Right? It's because they're acting on instinct or desire. That's it. Their minds are shut off when it comes to this, and they act on desire, impulse. Same thing when it comes to gambling. Why do people, it's so irrational. It makes no sense. You're better off using your time to go and make money. It just makes sense. No, they'll gamble and they keep gambling. Next time. They have shut off their minds and they're acting purely based on, this is what Iblis wants, right? So when the Prophet ﷺ says, ignorance takes root, it's a very negative thing. Because when human beings act purely on ignorance, it's not going to go well. Right? It's not going to go well. It's going to be an era of injustices, an era of problems, an era of disease, an era of whatever. Right? Back in, I think, the 1800s, I forgot where exactly, but a certain Western country, women kept dying when they gave birth. The mortality rate skyrocketed. And they had no idea why. It put the medical industry or the medical field in panic mode. Why do these ladies keep dying? Right? And so one physician, for whatever reason, washed their hands prior to helping a lady give birth. And notice that lady didn't die. Okay, well, is that just a coincidence? So once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, he realized there must be something that the doctors themselves are transmitting to these women, causing them to die. So he went to the doctor, said, we need to wash our hands. That's what's going on. You know what they did? They got mad at him. They wanted him to get fired. They persecuted the guy. Right? How can you? We are professionals. Do you not think? He, the first doctor, was acting rationally. These other doctors were acting what? Emotionally. Right? Until they figured out, wait a minute, this actually works. Right? So this is how terrible of a situation when ignorance takes root of a place. Now, what does this mean for us today? We're not in this situation. We're not. Right? And even though we might feel that people are acting more based on ignorance than knowledge in comparison to previous decades, we're still not this bad, right? But what it means to us is knowledge is incredibly important. If society will be in a very bad situation if ignorance spreads, well, how do we prevent that? How? By focusing on spreading knowledge, right? So, I said about parents, and you get a job, you need to become a doctor or a lawyer because it's good money and whatnot. There's a good side to that. That is, you got to get knowledge. You have to learn. You don't want your kids to be just somebody who is lazy and has no knowledge and has no profession. There's a good side to that, right? So we need to take preventative measures and realize that we are doing society a favor when we educate ourselves, right? When we learn, when we grow in our rational potential. Now, we're all familiar with Obamacare, right? See, one aspect about Obamacare is that Obamacare doesn't just, as far as I've understood, doesn't just provide people with more affordable insurance and access to medical institutions. It also allows them access to resources that are preventative measures, right? So instead of waiting for a person to become diabetic and then providing them with the insurance to get treatment, why don't we provide them with the resources and the means to prevent becoming a diabetic in the first place, right? And so one historian was talking about this and said, you know what? This idea came from the Muslim world 1,000 years ago. Preventative care. Like we do things to prevent things from happening so that we don't have to deal with it. One thing that we can do now is educate ourselves so we don't have to deal with ignorant fools later. Because these fools rise, they're able to stick their heads out when there's no knowledgeable people, or they're little, or they're too busy, right? So that's something to do. Right now, Muslims are very reactionary. We just react to what's going on. And don't get me wrong, we're actually really good at it. We're really good at reacting and getting ourselves together and dealing with the situation. Well, we become really good at it. But we have to take it to the next step to where we actually prevent things from happening in the first place. Or that we're already prepared for certain scenarios before they actually happen. Right? Take, for example, people, like a woman who's trying to run away from a violent husband. Right now, when a case like this comes to me, I just have to react. I have to find someone who can help, it's a reaction, because we don't have the institutions. We don't have the institutions, right? And she has to call the local masjid to get help. Well, why isn't there a shelter for such people that our community is aware of? See what I mean? A lot of these women, or refugees, asylum seekers, end up where? They end up in churches. Because the Muslim community is more interested in building masajid that we don't need, right? Masajid that we don't need. There's enough masajid in our area. And I underline don't need. If the community needs another masjid, fine, right? There's a need for it. But if there's no need for it, why not put all of that money in something the Muslim community actually needs? Like, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable the tens of millions of dollars that are being putting towards masajid that are literally 2 miles away from the next masjid. 4 miles away from the next masjid. All over Orange County, by the way. Think about what the Muslim community actually needs. Why are you putting a masjid there? Oh, because some people don't want to drive 10 minutes. Well, thank you. Thank you. Let's go ahead and leave these women to suffer without any place to go. Let's continue to let Muslims come as refugees and end up in churches that are going to try and get them to become Christian. Right? because some people don't want to drive an extra 10 minutes. Right? Anyway. And then the Prophet ﷺ continues the hadith and says that among the signs of the hour is drinking alcohol and the spread of relationships outside of marriage. Now, no doubt these two have happened in some places. Now, is it to the extent of what the Prophet ﷺ is saying? I don't think so, because there's still a lot of laws around regulating these things, and there's still a lot of customs around these things, right? There's a certain age limit for drinking alcohol. There are certain laws that regulate this. It seems like when the Prophet ﷺ is talking about this, it's like it's so widespread that it's everywhere. Everywhere. People are drinking alcohol left and right. If somebody goes to work drunk, that's not good. And so even though it's openly accessible in America, let's say, there are still some things where you're allowed to do it and you're not allowed to do it. So it limits the times in which people can drink alcohol. And people know if they're a professional, they're not going to drink alcohol on a weeknight. And if they do, it's a small amount because they know they have to wake up for work tomorrow and they don't want a hangover. And see what I mean? It seems like the Prophet, when he says that alcohol consumption is among the signs of the hour, I mean, it's bad. It's everywhere. And the same thing when it comes to promiscuity. Although, I can understand why some people might think that it's happening now. All right. Let me go ahead and stop here, because the next hadith, there's some explanation that I want to give. So we'll stop at hadith number 72. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.